Monkey Tales.
Gather round and let me tell you a story. A Bahamian folktale. The Secret of Mermaid Pond by Kimberly Mutra. Long ago, but not so very long, there was a little boy named Philly who lived with his mother in the spring. His mother knew all about the spring, or the mermaid pond as it is now known, and the beautiful mermaid that lived there. Philly's mama told him his brother had gone to the spring months ago and the mermaid had taken him away, and he was never ever seen again. After his brother left, Philly would help his mother with the chores around the house. He would tow the water to wash the clothes, make his bed, wash the dishes, sweep the floor, feed the dogs and the hog. Before his mother went to work, she would whisper in his ear, "Philly, don't you go to the spring alone, because the mermaid will snatch you. She loves to take children away. If you go to the spring to fetch water, always go with someone. You hear me, boy?" she warned Philly. This made little Philly, who was only 8 years old, very frightened. Every day, he would see the children in the neighborhood swimming in the mermaid pond, picking sugar apples and grapes. He also went in the spring from time to time, and he wondered why his mother was making such a fuss about it. The spring was Philly's favorite place to be. He can dive and swim, find cocoa plums, pick sugar apples, climb up trees, swing from the ropes, down into the pond, swim like a fish, and catch a soldier crab. One bright summer morning, Philly got up and did all his chores. And then Mom said, "Now remember what I told you." "Yes, Mom." "Don't you go to the spring alone." "Yes, Mom." "Philly, promise me you won't go to the spring alone." "Yes, Mom." "If you're not careful, the mermaid will snatch a young boy like you. If you ever see her, run like hell. Don't look back. If you hear her call your name, don't answer." "Yes, Mama," Philly said. Just as his mama was out of his sight, he dashed to the spring. While he was walking to the spring, he saw a ripe, juicy sugar apple spying at him. "Oh, wow! I have to get that one. Gee, it's huge!" Now, Philly was a good listener, but he didn't always do as he was told. The spring looked so inviting today that he went ahead through the muddy and bushy pathway. The spring somehow was different on this day. He couldn't believe how beautiful the spring looked. It was inviting him to come into the water and stay a while. He had been here and never had seen the spring like this. The spring was surrounded by a variety of tall, green, native fruit trees, including custard apple and sugar apple, almond, cocoa plums. Around the edges of the spring were patches of leatherback ferns, and the water in the spring was crystal clear, so fresh and clean that he took a sip of it. The sun glistened on the fresh spring water, and it invited him to drink and swim in it. So Philly took a sip of the fresh spring water and a dip into the pond. Then he backflipped into the water and swam to the big dilly tree across the pond. He shook the big dilly tree. The dilly didn't drop, so he climbed up the tree with his cocoa bag to pick the fruit. Soon he was back in the water again, jumping and playing around. Then he spotted the tall tree with the huge sugar apple on it. He started to climb the tree branch by branch. Philly looked up and saw many birds flapping their wings frantically and making loud, squawking sounds. They quickly flew away as if something strange had frightened them. Then he heard a voice calling his name. Philly! 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 Who's that calling my name? Philly spoke. Out of nowhere, something shook the sugar apple tree. It shook it again and again. Philly crouched down to have a look. Then the tree shook again. This time he only saw some spots of light coming through the leaves of the tree. Philly now remembered what his mother had told him about the mermaid that lived in the spring. Was this the mermaid, or was it something else? Philly turned around and gazed at the weird, hairy, green figure coming towards him from out of the spring. It was green, mossy, and completely drenched with brownish, mucky water. He had bulging eyes, big, sharp, gritty yellow teeth, long black locks of hair, and toes covered in fish scales to help him swim in the water. The spring monster was carrying a huge croquet sack on his shoulder. When Philly saw the spring monster, his bag dropped as he climbed higher and higher to the very top of the sugar apple tree.
Why are you up the tree?
Spring monster asked. You are a strange mermaid. My mom told me to stay away from you, Philly replied. What are you going to put in that croquet sack?
Nothing yet,
said Spring Monster.
Why, I just came to pick a boy off a tree,
he yelled. Who, me? Cried Philly. Spring Monster took an axe from his sack and began to cut the tree down. He chopped and he chopped and he chopped. He chopped even faster, but the tree wouldn't fall. The tree was huge. So the spring monster decided to shake the tree. He shook the tree. Philly held on for dear life. Then he shook it again and again and again and again. Philly fell into the arms of the spring monster. He put Philly into his bag and dived down into the water. Help me, yelled Philly. He took Philly to his underwater cave and locked him in a cage.
Ah, you are the right size. I don't have to fatten you up like your brother Willie,
said Spring Monster. As Spring Monster was about to put Philly into a pot of boiling water, he heard a whistling sound and a beautiful mermaid appeared out of nowhere. She was so beautiful that Philly couldn't take his eyes off her. She had green blue eyes, long black curly hair, and a forest green tail. Is this the mermaid my mother was talking about? He thought. The mermaid heard Willy's call and came to see what was going on.
Stop, spring monster. Let him go. Put him down this instant,
the mermaid ordered.
No, I will not let him go,
yelled Spring Monster.
Well then, suffer the consequences,
the mermaid shouted. The mermaid took a tail and spun it around and around and around and said, Manta ray, Manta ray, I wish for Spring Monster to be a fish, as small as a dish. In less than a flash, Spring Monster was turned into a fish. Seconds later, the whirly spirit that brings the water in and out of the cave appeared. She swooped up the tiny fish, who was Spring Monster, and flushed him into the ocean. Later that day, back home, Philly's mother and the settlers were all over the neighborhood looking for Philly.
Where could he be?
Philly's mother cried.
I know he would never go to the spring.
The next day, the settlers searched the spring and found Philly's bag. They took it to Philly's mother.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
cried Philly's mom.
The beautiful mermaid has taken away my sons!
She hollered.
First, my son Willy, and now Philly is gone.
Back at the cave, Philly was very curious about the beautiful mermaid that stood in front of him.
Who are you?
Philly shivered.
I'm Merlin the mermaid. Don't be afraid. I wouldn't harm you. My mom said that you'd take children away,
Philly cried.
Oh, no, Philly. I love children. I would never harm them. The Spring Monster and I have been living in these caves for many centuries. Spring Monster is really a springaloo. They are very friendly, but somehow this springaloo has become possessed with an evil spirit. There is only one way to free him of this darkness, and that is to capture him and turn him into a beautiful underwater plant. Would you like to help me, Philly? I have a plan,
Merlin asked.
Yes, I would love to help you. What do you want me to do?
Philly answered excitedly.
Philly, I want you to catch Spring Monster when the whirly spirit brings the water back into the cave. Here, take this bag and put him in it,
Merlin stated. In a few minutes, the sound of the whirling spirit came again. This time, it brought the water back into the spring from the ocean. With it was the Spring Monster as a little fish. Philly quickly took the sack and put the wiggling fish in it. Then Merlin said the magical words. Manta ray, I wish to turn Spring Monster into a patch of seaweed, so he wouldn't ever have cravings for human or greed. Spring Monster was turned into a seaweed plant. Merlin the mermaid took the Spring Monster and planted him at the bottom of the cave.
There now,
she said.
You will be a shelter and food for any animal that come by. every time a fish nibbles on your leaf, it will grow back instantly.
Spring Monster just waved his leaves up and down as to say thank you. Merlin searched the Spring Monster's cave and found Philly's brother Willie, who was kept there for 8 months. He was very weak, thin, and dehydrated. She gave him fresh water to drink and fish to eat. He was soon feeling strong enough to go back home. Willie told the mermaid that the Spring Monster tried to feed him to make him fat, but he only ate a little every time and never gained any weight. When Philly saw his brother, he couldn't believe his eyes. He ran towards him and gave him a big hug.
I missed you so much, Willie,
Philly cried.
Me too,
echoed Willie. He was overjoyed to see him.
I can't wait to see Mummy's face when she sees you again. She thought the mermaid had taken you away. When I go home, I will tell everyone that Merlin is not the evil monster they make her out to be, but a kind and loving mermaid,
said Philly. The mermaid took the boys through the underwater caves and finally to the top of the spring.
Thank you, Merlin. I will never forget what you have done for us. You have saved my life and my brother's. We are so grateful. Will we see you again?
Philly asked.
Of course. Anytime you need me, just say, Monterey, Monterey, and I will be there.
The boys said goodbye and went home. Just as they were coming out of the spring, they saw their mother, and she saw them. They ran to her open arms. They hugged each other for a very, very long time.
Oh, my boys are finally home! Thank God,
she said happily. Ma bim, ma boom, my story just ended.
Monkey Tales.